everybody, it's that time again. It's February and it's time for the Plym Piecemakers demonstration. Now for February we're using another one of the Guild tutor boxes. This time, if I can turn the page, we're using tutor box number 3, which is bright crosses with a low volume background. I've sent the link for the PDF pattern, so you've got the requirements, what you need to cut out. Basically, for this cross pattern we need to cut out some 1.5 inch squares. Now this is the background fabric and you need 4 1.5 inch squares. This is the smallest size on the instructions. You also need 2 of your cross fabric 1.5 inch squares, and you need a piece that is 3.5 by 1.5. You also need some 2.5 inch squares and some sashing strips. These are 4 inches by 1.5 inches. So once you've got your bits cut out, the next step will be for me to thread up the sewing machine, and we're going to join, I don't know if you can see, but we're going to join a cross fabric and a background fabric, the small squares together. We're going to do that twice, and we're also going to sew background squares to the long cross strip, and then once they're pieced together we'll be able to join the block to make, there it is, you'll see you've got your joined together squares there. You've got some of the bigger squares for the corners, and you've got your longer cross strip. Now if I've got time, I intend to make a posh pocket with my tutor box sample, and so if time is permitting I will carry on with the instructions for the posh pocket once I've made the top piece. So if you wanted to make a posh pocket, you're also going to need some PVC plastic, a piece of wadding the same size as your quilt top, and a background, which can either be another pieced background or it can be just a piece of background fabric the same size as your block. And then we'll need some strips to do the zip on the PVC, and they'll need to be 2 inches wide. You'll need a zip, and you'll also need fabric for binding the outside. the block is coming together, and we have, this is the actual cross block here, and to join them together with a cross in the middle, you take the border fabrics that you were told to cut and your cross pieces, you sew the 1.5 inch square to the 4.5 by 1.5 strip. That will then be sewn to this block, and then sew that there, and then when that's done you're going to join the 3 rows together, and that will be the front of the block. I might just add a sashing, a border strip. My outsides for the posh pockets using tutor box number 3. This one I've just put vertical and horizontal sashing, and this one is as the pattern with the extra cross in the middle. So the next step now is for me to get the plastic pieces and sew the binding strips over the edge of the plastic so that I can insert a zip. I've now inserted a fabric strip to join these 2 pieces of plastic together, and now I need to add the binding strip to the top. When you do this, to sew onto this plastic, you either need a Teflon foot, or what I've found is the best is just to use the walk-in foot. When we come to do the zipper, we'll already have the binding on, so we should be able to just get away with a normal zipper foot when we come to the next stage. But for this part, because this sticks to the bed of the machine, you probably need your walk-in foot, so we'll give this a go. And the other thing I should have said is that obviously you've got to be careful where you put pins in this. So the only pin I've put here is on this piece because there's a fabric strip. For the second posh pocket, I don't need to join the plastic, so I've cut a piece of plastic about 1 inch longer and wider than the finished sample, and then I've cut it, I don't know if you can see the pieces, but I've cut here, so this is where the zip's going to be inserted between the 2 pieces. So what I need to do is bind the 2 edges of the plastic with the binding strips in the same way as I did on the other posh pocket. So yeah, I've got 2 binding strips, so I'll join those, and I've got the walking foot on, so that will all be easy to do. So the next stage now is to insert the zipper into the 2 pieces, between the 2 pieces of plastic. And what I've done is I've chose zips that are longer than I need, because you need to be careful that you don't catch these metal ends in your seam allowance. so it's safer to go with one that's longer than you need, because you can chop off the excess bits. So I've changed to the zipper foot on the machine, and the one I've got has got, it's a Teflon one, but now that we've covered the plastic with the binding, we don't need the Teflon one. And then it's just a case of sewing as close to the edge of the fabric as you can. I've pulled the zipper tab down to start off with. Now that I've sewn past, I can take that back up to the top. So the zips are in now, and it's time to attach the plastic to the back of the posh pocket. I've made sure that the metal prongy bits are off the end and that the plastic covers the posh pocket. Try and get your zip lined up, because it looks a bit odd if your zip's at a jaunty angle. And we need the walking foot back on again, because obviously we've got this plastic to sew. So I've put the walking foot back on. I'm also going to increase the stitch length so that it's more of a tacking type stitch to get that sewn on. I'm going to put it up to just over 3. And so I'm going to start here and then sew all the way around the outside. Now you can add some pins, but you can only pin right on the edge, because if you put a hole in the middle of the plastic, it's obviously going to be there forever. So if you do need to pin, you can obviously pin here through the zip, and pin right on the edge so that it will be within the seam allowance. So that's that one. The other one's slightly different, as I said, because I was being economical with my plastic. It turns out I've got quite a bit now left at the bottom. So on this one I've got a fabric top and a fabric stripe, because I didn't have enough plastic. So I've attached the linings or the pockets to the back of the tutor box samples. There's the one, and the zip, which works quite well. I've trimmed the plastic off using my general purpose scissors, paper scissors, not my sewing scissors, and the next step will be to add the binding all the way round. So that's that one, and the second one, which is the other version with the red sort of cross in it, with the jigsaw puzzle back on it. And again, I'm quite pleased how that one's turned out. So they're ready for the binding. I'm ready to attach the binding. On this one I'm using a 2-inch strip of fabric, so I need to make sure that I'm not overly generous with my 1/4-inch seam allowance, and that was just because that was all the fabric I had left. You want to leave a little thread tail with the mitre cut and start stitching. I would start probably near the zip and stitch towards the corner. When we get to the corner, we need to mark on the binding strip a point 1/4 inch in from the edge. It's easy on this little ruler because there's a 1/4 inch mark which I can just lay on the edge of the fabric and mark 1/4 inch. So I need to sew just as far as that line. And then stop, take one reverse stitch, and then sew out to the corner. corner, you fold the fabric back up on itself, like so. You can see, but like so. And then fold the fabric back so that it's running along the edge of the next seam. And stick a binding clip just there. Oh, and I should have said we're sewing the binding to the plastic side of the pocket. So once we've done that, we turn and we start again down the next side. Just going to cut some pokies off the edge here. So that I can see where I'm going. Again, when you come to the corner, we want to mark the 1/4 of an inch. Go just as far as the line, one back stitch, sew out to the corner. Want to open this one up, keep it straight on the edge if you can. It's a little bit tight, and where the pieces overlap, we're going to mark there. So I've marked the angle on there, as you can see. So what I need to do now is trim that, keeping that angle 1/2 an inch away from that line. I am attaching the binding on this second pocket, and I'm approaching the final corner. So what I need to do is put my ruler with the 1/4 of an inch mark along the edge of the fabric, and make sure it's straight, make a mark like so. And sew towards the mark. Take one back stitch and then sew out to the corner. So you take this end and flip it up, mark 45 degrees, bring it back, and pop a binding clip, pop a binding clip to hold that in place, and then we will start sewing. Because we need to join these two pieces, we only want to sew a couple of inches on this side. So to join the binding, we want to open this one up. Try and keep it flat. And pop a binding clip right there. Then get that one out of the way. Bring this one over and mark where it joins. Move everything out the way. I've made a nice mess here. So moving on to the cutting area. Take that binding clip out. I haven't got a lot of room here, so I might need to unpick a few stitches. But we need to sew 1/2 inch away into the long piece of the binding. If you've got your 45-degree line and put the 1/2 inch mark on your drawn line, you can then cut that away. So now when we bring these two together again, we'll have a nice mitered join. So we've just got to sew those together and then continue sewing the seam. And there it is, all done. So just the hand sewing to be done. So that's the second posh pocket. That's the wrong side. There's our tutor box sample from number 3. And here's the other one. They just need to be hand sewn. So here are my finished posh pockets. The binding just needs to be hand sewn down now on the other side. So that's the first version. And then the second version. And I'm quite pleased with those. So that's the posh pockets, almost finished. And that was tutor box number 3.